How's it going, guys? It's me, your boy, BW, once again coming at y'all with a new video. And this time, I wanted to do something different and something that's been on my mind for a long time. And that is to talk about the production of, Exit Wounds, a great movie that me and my friends, made something very ambitious. And, I wanted to talk a little bit about all the references that are in it, how it was made, the struggles during recording, all the nitty gritty and stuff. So without further ado, let's get into this. Now, to actually talk about this, we need to go to the origins of this project. This movie started being made around a difficult time for me, both personally and professionally here on YouTube, because at the time of the making of this movie, we were still working on the second episode of the score, which on its own was its own cataclysm that I will talk about someday in a different video, a behind the scenes of the score. If you guys like this video, I can make one for the score. But one thing about me is that no matter what the fuck I'm going through in my life, I always turn my pain into art. So at the time, I was going through a lot of shit, a lot of emotional distress and all that bullshit because, some of you that are not blind, some of you are not stupid. You've noticed that, in my content I had somebody around that was always there and stuff like that. My relationship broke off with that person, and it was around this time I was going through a lot of stuff. Even though that at the beginning of the making of this movie, there was, we had broken up for fucking, ages, but still, obviously, I was going through the motions here, and I decided to make this movie to bounce back and to give me something to work on, really put my head into it. Now, as to what inspired this movie, around this time I had just finished watching Goodfellas and Scarface, which are two of my favorite movies, by the way. And when I watched Goodfellas and Scarface, I was like, I want to make something like this. And the production on the score was so slow because of, difficulties within the casting and stuff. Like I said, I'm not going to talk too much about that, but, I do got to mention it because it's what made this project come to life. Because while people were lollygagging around the fucking score, I took three of my friends, sorry, I was counting myself as my own friend. I took three of my friends that are credited in the movie, and I will talk about them later when I'm talking about the characters. And basically, I took my friends and I said, hey, I know you guys, want to work, and you guys, when you see a project, you fucking do, what you gotta do. So I took my friends and I said, we're gonna make a fucking movie. You know what I'm saying? Fuck the score for now because this shit is not going anywhere and it's pissing me off more than the first episode. Because the first episode had some technical difficulties too. And, people were not making the second episode any fucking easier. So I said, fuck that shit for now. Let's focus on making this shit. And when people want to fucking work, they will fucking work because this movie was made in 2 fucking months. 2 fucking months is all it fucking took to make this fucking movie because people were into it and people were working on it. Because the thing that people don't realize is that all I want is the voice lines and then I can do all the rest of the work. Because I literally do everything. You see the credits on fucking any fucking video on this channel that involves some cinematic, prowess, and you notice that it's edited by me, produced by me most of the time. It's like Obama, that meme with Obama giving himself a medal. That's, I don't want to, I'm literally that mean, but I don't want to be like that. It's just the fucking truth. Like, I am doing everything here. All I need is people to send their lines and I can do the rest of the work. So when the work is just solely on my hands, I can make shit much quicker. Lo and behold, this movie right here. So we started working on this, so 2 months, around July, and we finished it by the end of September. When I finished it, I was like, holy shit, I actually did it. Because, this was also something else for me because a while back, if you guys have been watching the channel for a long time, you know that I announced a different movie called Gangsters Utopia that I accidentally ended up deleting all the fucking files for, which I'm still mad about that shit, by the way. But, one day I will revisit Gangsters Utopia. It was a different movie. You know, something more like Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, which are great movies too that I love. But unfortunately, I lost everything I had on that shit. So someday we will revisit that. You know, stay tuned, okay? But you know, as of right now, I have no motivation to work on that because I'm gonna have to redo everything that I did, and I was already like 20 minutes deep into that movie. But as for the origins of this movie, that's all I gotta say for now. Now let's actually talk about the making of the movie. You know, when it comes to script wise, editing wise, production wise, all that. Everything that you see on screen was made using the DYOM 8.3 mod, which I do not recall now which version of the mod it is, but I worked with a few versions as they were getting updated and stuff like that. So a huge shout out to Miran, the man that is making this mod. You know, without him, this movie would not be possible. Now, to talk about how the scenes were made, you know, from a writing perspective. Everything was written by me, obviously. Again, the Obama meme. But it was all improvised on the fly, per se. Like, I have a general idea, and this is for every project that I make. I have a general idea in my head that I'm like, okay, I want to do this, and this is what's gonna happen. The scenes and the stuff in between are things that I improvise on the spot when it comes to the writing of them. Like, okay, I want to do this, but how is this gonna start? And I sit down with my ideas for a bit, and I start writing. And I start writing in the characters, and what is this character like, and what is the other character like, and how is this scene gonna play out? Is this guy gonna be angry? Is this guy gonna be confident? Everything is thought of up here, and then I just write it down so I can then send it on to my friends so they can voice act and whatnot. Now, as far as the editing process in itself, the musical choices were done by me based off of, the movies that I mentioned, yeah, and also, music that I thought would fit the scene, so that was all handpicked by me, and obviously I had to throw in some tributes and stuff, but we'll get to that when we get to that point in the video. I will mention it further when we get there, about like all the Easter eggs and stuff that you guys might have missed, or Easter eggs that you guys might not even know that were Easter eggs. As far as the how the scenes looked, obviously they're not the vanilla scenes because I put on some filters on them, and I also tweaked the sharpening a little bit, just to change how it looks. It's not none of that has to do with the graphics mods or anything that I have installed. That's all done in editing. All of the cool colors and shit that you see, that is done in editing. It has nothing to do with the actual recording process in itself. So yeah, now I will give you guys a quick rundown of like every scene and the play-by-play, like the hidden meanings and stuff behind every scene, right? So the movie follows these two guys, Frank and Vinny. If you guys haven't watched them, actually, if you guys haven't watched the movie, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, you're gonna get spoiled. But go watch the movie and then watch this. But they are ex-mob guys that used to work for the Forellis, and as a matter of fact, in the first scene, they're at the end of the road pretty much. Frank was just sitting in a rundown motel room when Vinny approaches him and tells him, "Hey bro, you look like hell and shit," because their friend that also got out of the mob life with them, Seymour, he went ahead and got whacked. Nobody knows who he got whacked by, at least not at the start of the movie. He just got whacked, and he left Frank a note to go get something at one of his old lockups, in case he died. And you guys might be wondering, why are we starting off the action like this? Why are we starting off the action like at the end of the road for these two guys? Why are we not learning more about what happened here? Like, why are they in this situation? Well, my friends, that's for Exit Wounds 2 to explain to you, because that's something that I have announced earlier on my Instagram. Exit Wounds 2 is happening, and it will explain how they got into this situation and everything else, right? So that's why, just to build intrigue, you'll know more about Seymour and Vinny and Frank and what the fuck happened, then. But basically in the next scene they go on and they go find what the fuck is this lockup all about. They go in, they find a box, and in that box there is a note attached to it telling Frank basically not to trust anybody, especially not him. And who is this him? As far as they are, protagonists know, they don't know who this him is, right? So later on, they take the box and, they need to find a way to open it. Frank cannot jimmy it open, so he decides that he's gonna take it by old Polly's later. But first they stop for breakfast at a diner, and they discuss a little bit like what the fuck is in this box, like what could it be. And then that's when Nicky Proda walks in, and Nicky Proda is another Forelli mobster that walked away from the life. But at this point in time, they do not know that. They think he's still with the Forellis. So Nicky uses this to his advantage to blackmail them. And he tells them, hey, don't go poking around where you shouldn't. Whatever's in that box, don't fucking, don't just throw it away. Burn it, whatever it is. And this is the thing that not a lot of people catch, is that Nicky knew what was in the box already. That's why he tells Frank later on to get rid of it, and even here he just warns him that, hey, don't dig in too deep, you're gonna fall in the hole, and then I can't do anything about it. So Frank just says, fuck it, he just says, fuck it, fuck this guy, I'm not scared of him, they're all scared of us. Actually, matter of fact, they're scared of us, because whatever's in this box is gonna fucking ruin them, right? So Frank, before he goes to Old Polly's, he decides to make a pit stop. And in the first scene, Vinny mentions his ex-girlfriend, who started going out with a new guy. And Frank here, it's to show the animosity, the animalistic side of Frank. Because a lot of people don't understand that when watching mob shows and mob movies is that the main guys are not supposed to be good guys. They're criminals. They do bad things, they kill people, they extort people, all that shit. So this scene was solely for the purpose to remind the viewer that Frank Horace is not a fucking good man, right? He's just, he's got the animalistic side of him. So Frank sees his ex-girlfriend going out with this guy named Rico, and who owns a club, because they mentioned that. And he follows them around until Rico pulls over and says, hey, what the fuck, why you following me around? And he's like, oh shit, it's you, Frank. So Frank beats the dog shit out of him, and then he fucking kills his ex-girlfriend, just to show the viewers that this man does not play around about anything, especially the people closest to him. Now, the relationship between Frank and Melissa will be expanded on in Exit Wounds 2. This was just simply a little, just a little whiff, right? Just a little whiff, because, like, what the fuck led to that? Like, what the hell? Like, why is this guy, trying to fucking blast his girlfriend? And, this is a lot of personal contrasts of mine, you know what I'm saying here? And I know I sound fucking crazy, but, when you get off of a relationship with somebody and shit, and you still like that person, and then you start seeing them, go out with other people and, all this bullshit, things start brewing inside of you, and all kinds of fucking thoughts, you just fly off the fucking handle. This was also a personal contrast of mine, but when I talk about the characters up next, on the next chapter, you'll know a little bit more, because I did put a little bit of me and Frank, and I think everybody in this project put a little bit of themselves into their characters, because that's what I always tell people, if you're gonna play a character, put a little bit of you in it, So Frank crashes out, and then he goes over to Old Polly's shop, and Old Polly's like, oh, you want me to open the box? And he's like, yeah, open the box. They open the box, and what they find inside is, makes them go into a frenzy. It's evidence that Seymour had been collecting over the years about the Forellis and everybody involved in that shit. There was files about Nicky, files about Frank, files about everybody. It was leverage, right? So as soon as they see that, Frank calls Vinny up and says, we gotta meet up. So they go ahead and go to the abandoned mall downtown next to the police station. And when they meet up, Frank is like, yo, check this out. He shows them the evidence and shit, and Vinny just goes crazy too. And he's like, and this is, the first signs that, the first few hints at the viewer that, like, something is not right with Vinny, right? Because Vinny starts being very apprehensive, like, Frank, we gotta burn all this shit up. We gotta burn all this. And that's when Frank proposes the idea that, oh, we gotta go into witness protection program. We use this to our advantage, because this is our way out. And Vinny's still apprehensive about it, but he just says, maybe you're right. And that's when Nicky walks in and he tells him, you're gonna work for me or I'm gonna get you guys whacked. I see you found out what what was inside of the box. And this is another implication that Nicky was the guy that whacked Seymour, because because this is what they discussed. Well, this is what Frank and Vinny discuss a lot of the times, is that, hey, it was definitely Nicky. Nicky did this shit. Nicky killed Seymour. That's the belief that the viewer and the characters are stuck on. It was Nicky. Nicky did all this. All the suspicions are on Nicky, right? Because how the fuck does Nicky know all of this stuff, right? How does he know that what was inside of the box? How does he know that we would come looking for the box and all that stuff? And another subtle hint that I threw that Nicky was following Frankie around is that when Frankie leaves the shop that belongs to old Polly, you can see a car in the distance that is following him. So they say, okay, what are we gonna do here? And Frank is like, we're gonna keep him happy, do a few jobs for him. And that's when the whole montage with Push It to the Limit begins. And one of the most fun scenes that I made, honestly, didn't require any dialogue. It was just cool action shots. So after that whole thing, they're on a different job, and this is an important job here, because this is where we meet another, a menace of a character, alright, an absolute menace. So this job, they gotta steal the car of an important made man in the Veliano family. And the Veliano family does not exist in the GTA lore, but it's a family that, was created by my good friend Josh, Solid Wolf, as you guys know him. And, the Veliano family is a very, they're very big shots, alright? They got casinos and Venturas and stuff, just like the Sindacos and everything else, right? But this is way after the story of San Andreas. But, so what happens here is that Frank and Vinny, they're tasked with stealing this guy's car, Johnny Veliano's car. And, they're having a whole argument in the car. That's when Frank reveals to Vinny that he killed his ex-girlfriend. And he crashes out on him a bit, and, Vinny's like, damn, this guy's fucking crazy. But, Frank gets out of the car, walks on over, steals there's a little bit of lock picking on the lock, steals the car of Johnny Veliano. And it seems like Johnny doesn't notice it, but he does. Because when they reach the spot where they put the car, Johnny shows up. And he's like, you two have any idea who the fuck I am? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know what I'm saying? Johnny basically goes on this big rant telling them that he owns all these fucking casinos, and that he's part of the Veliano family. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You guys are fucking insane doing all this shit. And basically threatens them and leaves in a different car. Because a lot of people might see the movie and be like, so what, he just goes off, he doesn't fucking take his car. The truth is, Johnny Veliano, he couldn't give less of a fuck about that car. You know what I'm saying? It's just about a statement, like, how dare you steal from me? Like, me, a made guy, you stealing from me? It was just to make a statement. And he basically told them, you either you go ahead and whack Nicky Proda, or we're gonna whack you. And this is also when Johnny Veliano fucking reveals to them that, hey, Nicky Proda is not in the Forellis anymore. He's just, a fucking nomad like the two of you fucking idiots, and he's playing with you guys. So Frank and Vinny are like, well, shit, now we got nothing holding us back. So basically what happens is Frank, after this scene, goes to the police station where he meets Detective Peterson, and he tells Detective Peterson all of this stuff. And during the montage, we see that he's already been in contact with Detective Peterson, and they've talked about this. And then he tells him all this, and it's like, okay, Detective Peterson is like, hey, here's what we're gonna do. All right, you're gonna go in there, and you're gonna wear this wire, and you try to get him to confess to some of these crimes, and even potentially to the murder of Seymour, right? But before he meets up with Nicky and Vinny, Frank goes and takes a rest at the motel. And this might be my favorite part in the whole movie, the dream sequence. As you guys can tell, the dream sequence is a big reference to something that I will mention in the references chapter. Not yet though. But yeah, he has a whole crazy dream where you see where he's at the pier, down by the beach. And Frank is completely lost, like, where the fuck am I? And that's when he sees Seymour in the distance. And approaching Seymour is Nicky, and he's crouched down, he's holding a Desert Eagle. And, Frank starts going crazy, starts running towards Seymour to save him, but he's not moving. He's running in place. He's like, Seymour, watch out, screaming and everything. And then Nicky kills Seymour. What does this symbolize? Obviously, the belief that everybody thinks, Nicky killed Seymour, and that's Frank's belief of, yes, Nicky fucking killed Seymour. This is, definitely what happened here. But then he is approached by Vinny in his dream, and Vinny's like, Frank, our true enemy is yet to reveal himself. And, Frank is confused, like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then Vinny walks away, and when you see Vinny walk away, you can spot Johnny Veliano standing on top of one of the stands there, and Vinny is walking towards him, and then they both vanish. This is another one of the indications that, Vinny isn't all that that we think. And also the intent that Vinny has to join the Velianos later on in the movie. So while Frank is staring at Vinny disappearing before his eyes, he's then teleported to a cabin in the woods, where Nicky is standing there, and he's got two bodies next to him. One of them is Melissa, Frank's ex, and the other one is Seymour. And why are these two bodies here? It's not just some random thing. It's just to represent the guilt that Frank feels for what happened to both of them. Even though that, yes, Frank killed his ex and stuff, he never wanted things to be that way. Right? He never wanted things to end that way. It will still weigh heavily upon him, obviously, and this goes to show that weight already. And he has a whole argument with Nicky, blaming him for the death of Seymour. In one of the shots, you can see the police standing behind Frank when Nicky mentions his association with the LSPD. And obviously at the start too, I'm not gonna go over that. The FBI is also standing behind him at the start of the dream to represent him going into witness protection. Here, the LSPD detective and the LSPD officer represent basically the same thing, almost, as a witness protection, but obviously not on the same level, because, they're currently investigating and helping him out in the present state of the movie. And then, that's when Nicky plants the doubt into everybody's head that, like, did I really whack Seymour? Was it really me? The gun was in your hands, basically. Once again reinforcing the guilt that Frank felt, because Frank felt that if they didn't, walk out of the Forelli family, Seymour would still be alive, and he felt the guilt, which is why the next section of where we see Frank holding the gun to Seymour, and he's, the dream ends when he shoots him, is to show Frank's overwhelming guilt for Seymour's death. He feels like, there was something he could have done to protect his friend, but unfortunately he couldn't. So what happens next is Frank wakes up from his nightmare dream, however you want to, take this. This is up to anybody's perception. And Frank decides, okay, it's time to go, because Vinny calls him and says, hey, come on, we're here and we're waiting for you. And so they meet up at the mall where they had initially met up, all those scenes ago. And, they start confronting Nicky Proda about his, association with the Forellis, or the lack thereof of an association. And, the police is outside in the van, they're listening into this conversation, and that's when Nicky reveals that no, he didn't whack Seymour, but he knows who did. And he was, as he was about to reveal who did it, the culprit himself shoots Nicky, and the culprit is Vinny. This is the biggest plot twist ever here in this movie, right? And it's something I thought of from the beginning. Originally, we had other endings planned, for this, but at the end of the day, this is what I chose to go with, because I felt like it had more shock value, and which was, the big plot twist, because I've been throwing hints the whole movie that, something wasn't right there. So Vinny shoots Nicky, and he's like, what the fuck, are you doing? Frank is, says that to him. And he's like, sorry, Frank, but I can't go out like this. and he, basically comes clean to him and says, hey, it was me. I killed fucking Seymour, and now I'm gonna kill you too, because Vinny, and here's the explanation, because a lot of people might not understand why Vinny did it. Vinny did not want to become a rat. Vinny wanted to stay in the mob life because that's all he ever knew. He didn't want to go into witness protection. That's why he was apprehensive in the first place. And that's why in the scene he mentions that he wants to join the Velianos, because Johnny Veliano said, hey, whack Nicky or we'll whack you. And he's like, oh, if I whack Nicky and, we're gonna be straight, and I gotta whack Frank too because he's a rat. And, this is gonna be basically my bargaining chip to get into the Velianos. But obviously, things don't go to plan. The police burst through the door because they heard the gunshot and everything, the whole commotion. They run in there. Vinny makes his escape, and Frank gets arrested. He gets taken into custody. The next scene, is Vinny waiting, out of town at the Angel Pine junkyard. And he's sitting there, he pulls up and he's just sitting there waiting for the Velianos to show up, and they come in and they're like, hey, Johnny's like, all friendly, yeah, you did us a good favor, like, hey, come on, you're gonna get your buttons, kid, and they go into the little warehouse there, and he tells them, hey, take a seat, there's only one chair in the warehouse, Johnny came with his men, and Vinny was all alone. And they talk for a bit, and he's like, you fucked up, Frank shouldn't, if there was anybody that shouldn't have walked, out of that place alive, it was Frank, because he's a rat. Now he's gone into witness protection, and it's gonna be hard to reach him, right? And then he's like, oh, I'm sorry and all that stuff, and then boom, Vinny was never gonna become a made man, because Vinny is half Irish, you know what I'm saying? They mentioned this a few times during the movie, calling him a half Mick, and shit like that. Vinny is half Irish, he could never become a made man either way, and he was just, he was delusional to believe that. But, they took him to the warehouse, and Johnny whacked him, because he was a loose end, and he was tying up the loose ends, and he fucked up tremendously. He fucked him over twice in Johnny's mind, so Johnny killed him. And he leaves the warehouse, and then the final scene of the movie is a news report saying that Frank is in court, and he's tied to the Forellis, and he's gonna basically give his testament and all of that stuff in court, which will set us up into the second movie. So that's it for the scene breakdown here, and we're gonna move on to the next chapter. Now we will talk a bit about the characters and the casting in this movie. And what better way to begin than with the man himself, Frank Orris, who was played by me. Okay, I'm not gonna glaze myself here. You guys will let me know if I did a good performance or not in the comments, and whatnot. But, Frank Orris is a character that was originally written for the score, and he is in the score, but the movie, the Exit Wounds movies are separate from the score's universe. Alright, we made it so because of the existence of Vinny, and Seymour's also in the score, but we because of the existence of Vinny and Vinny whacking Seymour, that messes with the canon of the score, because none of that shit has happened there, and what's gonna happen later on to Seymour is still yet to be written. Now Frank is also half Irish like Vinny. But the thing is, this is where they both differ a lot in personalities. Frank was a very, strong enforcer for the Forellis back in the day, but he could never become a made man as well because of his Irish heritage. Now Frank is heavily inspired off of Henry Hill, the character played by Ray Liotta in Goodfellas, okay, which is why you might notice some similarities and everything. Maybe not as much in this exact movie, but definitely in the second one, because we will approach more the Henry Hill type of angle, obviously without escaping too much from Frank's character, because Frank is his own character at the end of the day, and we can make him have some similarities with Henry Hill, but that's about it. Now the Frank's temper and his anger, and the crash out moments, or in this case the big crash out moment in the movie when he shoots the ex-girlfriend, that right there is to show the little bit of the Tony Montana inspiration as well, because if you watch Scarface, Tony was known for his loud crash outs and his fucking his crazy temper and just going absolutely ballistic.
Hey, who the fuck you think you're talking to, huh? You wanna fuck? Who the fuck you think I am? You fucking dumb boy? Come on, brother. Do you wanna go to war? Come on. Do you wanna go to war? We'll take you to war, okay? Tony, coño. Cálmate, man.
I did something, like that with Frank, but a little bit more tame, because again, Frank is his own character, Tony Montana is Tony Montana, Frank Oris is Frank Oris, just little inspirations here and there. Now, since we're on the whole Goodfellas bandwagon, I'm gonna talk about another character that was inspired by a character in Goodfellas. Again, Seymour was also written by Josh, because Seymour is also originally a score character, and Seymour is, his name is Roberto Seymour, and he is based off of James Conway from Goodfellas. Because in case you haven't noticed while watching the score or anything like that, because here in this movie he does not speak, he does not sound Italian. And why is that? Do you think that was like a problem on the voice actor's side? No, it was not. It's on purpose, because Seymour is just a compulsive liar that just lies to get his way in everything. He lies to play multiple sides at the same time, and he has no loyalty, no love, no nothing. He is basically very good at manipulation, which is why Frank in this movie, holds him, Frank and Vinny, while he was still playing the whole good guy card, they hold him at such a high regard, because, oh, Seymour helped us get out. But, the truth is that Seymour was just using them to fucking do his dirty work. And that is evidenced by the fact that Seymour also collected evidence on Frank and Vinny, even though they were his friends and they all got out together. And I'm not going to talk too much about Seymour's character in this movie, because in the second one, we'll learn more. Now, let's talk about Vinny O'Reilly. Vinny O'Reilly, the second protagonist of this movie, is completely, an opposite of Frank and anyone else. Vinny's just that guy that follows the wave, he rides the wave until he can't no more, and when he sees something that might be slightly better, he just hops on it without thinking twice. Which is why, if you watch the movie and pay close attention to Vinny during the scenes that he's in, you'll see that he mostly agrees with Frank on everything. Because he's just riding the wave, just saying yes, 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 here and there, right? And then, when he gets trapped, he's like a cornered animal. Because if you watch that scene when Nicky's about to reveal the truth, he just completely, switches up and he shoots Nicky, and he's like, I'm gonna join the Velianos. Because to Vinny there, it was his, the easy way out for him, because he didn't want to get arrested. And, he just wanted to keep doing the mob life, like I said, and he just decided, hey, you know what, Vinny being the weasel that he is, he decides, hey, I'm gonna join the Velianos, say fuck it all, and just, see where this takes me. But obviously, it didn't take him anywhere. Vinny was also played by my good buddy Comic Sans, okay? And Comic did a great job here, despite what he might think, alright? He did an amazing job at portraying Vinny. That's just the type of essence that I wanted for Vinny's character. Like, this guy is supposed to act like a fool, he's supposed to be obnoxious, because that's what Vinny's character is at the end of the day. Now, Nicky Proda, played by Willie WJR, great voice actor. Alright, he's actually a voice actor, unlike the rest of us. That we are not professional voice actors, but that Will is certified. And Will did a great job as Nicky Proda. You know what I'm saying? Throughout the whole movie, the initial part of the movie, everybody's led to believe that the main antagonist is gonna be Nicky, because the way he keeps antagonizing Frank and Vinny with the whole blackmail situation and the whole, hey, I'm watching you type thing. And even in Frank's dream, this man shows up and he's there haunting him and taunting him and everything. This, it was a great performance by will, and Nikki will be in Exit Wounds 2, because Exit Wounds 2 will be a sequel slash prequel, because it will be Frank in court retelling the events that led up to what happened in the first movie. Now, Nicky Proda, he was a part of the Forellis too, and he had a personal beef with Johnny Valiano, right? Because the thing is about the mafia is that you gotta respect the higher ups' orders and stuff like that. And the Forellis had, right now, as of right now, we're still writing the specifics of that, but the Forellis had some sort of agreement with the Valianos, and Nicky and Johnny never saw eye to eye. So as soon as Nicky got out of the Forellis, and he had some sort of control when he saw Vinny and Frank, he's like, I got these two idiots, they don't know that I'm out of the Forellis. Now I'm finally gonna get my revenge on Johnny Valiano for that one thing that happened. I'm not gonna spoil it. We're still working on it, writing wise, and you guys will just have to see it when it comes out. But this is how I'm gonna get my vengeance. This is just to explain to you guys why did Nicky go and attack Johnny Valiano of all people, right? Because the thing about Nicky is that he's extremely bitter and he doesn't let shit go easily, right? So he held on to that hatred for years, and as soon as he got his chance to get his revenge on Johnny Valiano, he fucking took it. He didn't even think about it. Now, why was Nicky watching Seymour so closely? Well, when Nicky got out, he immediately started looking up the 3 guys that he knew had left a long time ago, and he knew about Seymour's dealings, because Seymour does a lot of things, and again, they're not going to be expanded on in this movie, but in the, Exit Wounds 2, we will learn more. And he knew about Seymour's dealings and everything, and he always kept a close eye on him. And by keeping his eye on Seymour, he knew about the whole evidence box and all of that shit, because, again, not gonna spoil it, in the second movie will be revealed how he knew about all that, more deeply, but he knew, right now all you guys gotta know is that he knew because of him constantly watching Seymour and seeing what is going on. As soon as Seymour died, he was like, now there's nobody handling these guys, because despite everything, Seymour still had some contacts, and if Seymour was still around, Seymour would be able to quickly call him out and say, hey, this fucking asshole is not even in the Forellis anymore, because Seymour had contacts. Seymour knew everything here and there. That's how he got all of his fronts in Los Santos and stuff like that, and he basically would have been able to call out Nicky. Now, as to how Nicky knew that Vinny was the one that whacked Seymour, well, it's very simple, he was there when that happened. And that night when it happened, Vinny saw him there, and that's why throughout the movie, Nicky bitches out Vinny very quickly, and Vinny doesn't really say much back to him because he is aware that Nicky knows about this dark secret about him, whacking Seymour and shit like that. And that's why, Vinny later on is the one that brings up the note to Frank and is like, hey, look, Seymour left you this, just to get the suspicions off his back. But obviously, when Nicky was about to reveal the secret, he got killed. Now, to talk about Johnny Valiano before we move on to the minor characters. Johnny Valiano, he was an old capo of the Leone family, Salvatore Leone and all those people. But, after that, he left the Leone family and joined up with the Franzella crew. The Franzella family gave Johnny his own, his own men to control around here and there. And they operate out of Las Venturas, which is great for Johnny because, he gets to own all of these casinos like he mentions it and everything. But, they're expanding all throughout San Andreas, which is why we see Johnny at a liquor store. He is actually collecting for the family when we first see him, and then Frank gets to steal his car. And, had his personal beef with Nicky, but Nicky couldn't just let that shit go. And Johnny is a ruthless, wise guy, as you can tell by how aggressively he speaks to the characters and then by what he does to Vinny. Now, Johnny doesn't play, and he's the true definition of like an old school mobster, That's what Johnny is. Johnny Valiano was written by Josh, my good friend, or aka Solid Wolf, and he was also played by him in a great performance, an amazing performance there, because he really gave it his all and even learned some Italian while he was at it. Oh shit. Now, another important character role before we move on We are talking about Detective Peterson, who is played by me. Detective Peterson is basically the guy that, sorts out all this mess for Frank and, gets him into the witness protection program. Not a lot is known about Detective Peterson other than the fact that he worked, crimes that involved gangs and shootings and stuff like that. So obviously when a wise guy, or a so-called wise guy walks into the police station, Detective Peterson takes this case and he's like, we're gonna get this sorted out, right? Detective Peterson here serves as like the morally correct person, the morally good guy, like he's here to, make things right. And, he's doing things by the book. He's not a corrupt cop or anything. He's just doing what he must. Now for the minor characters that, only have a few sentences in or don't even say anything. Starting with Old Polly, the man that gets the box open. Old Polly's just a well-known mob affiliate. He goes all the way back to Frank's father. That's why he mentions that, like, oh, your old man, I owed your old man a favor. Polly will be a little bit of a bigger role in the next movie, because before he came to Los Santos, he was in Liberty for a while, and he was known to be like this guy that, hey, if you want lockpicks, you come in and get them. If you guys played Mafia 2, and Giuseppe, basically Paulie is that guy, but, for the Forellis and, mainly not just the Forellis, any wise guys that got into his shop, Forellis, Leonis, Sandacos, whatever. Paulie was your man if you wanted to do something. Now, Rico was just an entrepreneur. He didn't do much. He was just a very successful businessman. He owned a few clubs in Los Santos, and that's where Frank catches him. He's leaving he's leaving one of his clubs. He's just a, rich boy. His father was the one that actually made all the wealth on his own, and just passed it down for him. Like Rico's just a daddy's boy per se, and like he thinks that he's all powerful and all, but in the face of danger, you see how quickly he got folded by Frank. He was just playing the tough act, and Frank actually pitied him, which was something very rare, and he just beat him and spared his life, because even Frank himself says, I initially came here to kill you, but I ain't gonna do that, because this guy is just a fucking wimp. There's nothing, Frank wouldn't gain anything from killing him. Now, Melissa in this movie, she did not have any fucking really prominent role, you know what I'm saying? We barely even see her on the screen, alright? And, there's a reason for that, alright? There's a reason for that. Right now, I just wanted to just give the impression that, like, this is not too important. Like, this character is not too important at all. But, it will play a huge she will play a huge factor in the next movie. But, as of right now, all that we know is that she was Frank's ex, and always gave him a hard time about the life they were living, according to what Frank says to Vinny, and even Frank himself says to her. She did not stick it out for him, left him, and found another man, and this man was Rico, the club owner, because she loved going to clubs and drinking and getting drunk and shit, which was one of the biggest fucking arguments that they had back home. And we will see that again in the second movie, how their whole relationship went down the drain and shit like that. So yeah, that will be interesting. But yeah, as for all the characters and stuff, that is all of it. Now, this might be my favorite segment of this video, where I will tell you all the little references and stuff that I have sprinkled into this movie. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first reference isn't really a reference as much as it is a tribute, but still, I put in Push It to the Limit with a montage, of Frank and Vinny and Nikki doing, the jobs that Nikki gave them. just to pay some homage to Scarface. And in the movie Scarface Push It to the Limit, it's also played in during a montage of Tony building his empire. Here it's something completely different because there is no empire being built. It's just them doing a bunch of shit. Now, as for the next Easter egg, it is the Sopranos intro Easter egg. For those of y'all that have watched The Sopranos, I'm sure you immediately caught on to it, because of the song and everything. And, I've got this comparison side by side that I posted when the movie came out, and is now being displayed on the screen that shows, side by side what I did there. Didn't recreate it shot for shot, because, it takes a lot of work and a lot of skill that I don't have yet, admittedly, but I'm working on it, and, it's amazing. Now for the pier scene where Frank has a dream. That is also another Sopranos reference, because in The Sopranos, if you watch the show, Tony has these dream sequences that sometimes, they all have meanings, a lot of times. But specifically, the one that this one is based off is the one dream that Tony has when he's sick with food poisoning, and he's dreaming about all this shit, and especially about his friend's betrayal. I'm not gonna spoil a lot if you guys wanna watch The Sopranos, but yeah, pretty much that. And even one of the lines that Vinny says, our true enemy is yet to reveal himself, is also said in that one scene from The Sopranos.
A true enemy is yet to reveal himself, Frank.
What? Vin?
Our true enemy has yet to reveal himself.
And now, the final reference in here. I could have done more references in this movie, planted a little bit more Easter eggs, but, I wanted to give this movie its own identity, not like just, I don't want it to be just a full-on, Easter egg fest, right? It didn't make any fucking sense for that, but yeah. The final Easter egg is the scene where Vinny dies. If you guys notice, everything from the soundtrack to his death is resembling a scene from Goodfellas. When you guys hear the Layla song by Derek and the Dominos, in Goodfellas, that was the song that was played when the crew that pulled off a heist was all getting whacked. And the scene where Vinny gets whacked is reminiscent of the scene where Tommy gets whacked in Goodfellas. So, those are the two big references right there, and that is all for all these Easter eggs and references section. But yeah, guys, that's gonna be it for the behind the scenes of Exit Wounds. If you like this, let me know, and I can do behind the scenes of any other project that I have done. This was, relatively very fun to make, and I hope you guys end up liking this. And yeah, I'll catch y'all in the next one.